Conference call, back with another one. So Anthony Joshua is fighting Franklin, who is coming off of a loss from none other than Dillian Whyte, who is the former opponent of Anthony Joshua. And one would argue, well, why don't you just fight Dillian Whyte? Why do you fight the loser of that fight rather than the winner? And as a hardcore boxing fan, that is a question you should be asking. Because it seems that in the high competitive architecture of fairness, Anthony Joshua should be fighting Dillian Whyte. But with the case of Cody No Love Garbrandt taking on somebody like Trevin Jones, it seems like that's more of an equal fight. If you're both an MMA and a boxing fan, it seems like an equal fight for both. Because obviously these are two big stars in Anthony Joshua and No Love Cody Garbrandt, who need a kind of a tune-up. You see, a tune-up is a very ugly word in boxing. And even more so, a sin in mixed martial arts to talk about. But the thing is that the reality of the situation is that, let's just be real, Anthony Joshua deserves this fight with Franklin because he's fought nothing but top-level competition. And of course, in the UFC, you really have no choice but to take on top-level competition. So here's a comparison with these two fights that have just been made. By the way, if you didn't know, Cody Garbrandt is fighting Trevin Jones in UFC 285. And I'm going to tell you why those fights are equal in some way and not equal in another way. Okay, so for Anthony Joshua, let's set aside the fact that it's not fair in a competitive architecture for Anthony Joshua to take on a fight like that because he has this history with Dillian Whyte. He has claimed that Dillian Whyte is his rival, and by the way, they're literally 1-1 because if you guys didn't know, Dillian Whyte scored a knockout in Anthony Joshua during their amateur days. And you could find it in a very fuzzy video, home video, that was shot by somebody somewhere in the internet. But nonetheless, their record with each other, whether pro or amateur, is 1-1. And you think that there's a rivalry there. Obviously, Dillian Whyte got past Franklin in their last fight, to no surprise of anybody else, because obviously Dillian Whyte was more of the seasoned contender in that regard. Whereas with Franklin, he was just kind of bursting into the scene as this recent undefeated heavyweight going in there to fight a big name like Dillian Whyte. Well, Trevin Jones also came from a loss coming into this fight. And the similarities of those two are that they both got a decision going into this fight, but it doesn't really tell the story or the tale of the tape. Because prior to getting submitted and losing two decisions back-to-back from Trevin Jones, prior to that, he scored a knockout uppercut shot in a few fights ago. So the guy has knockout power, just like Cody Garbrandt. Cody Garbrandt has knockout power as well. I remember Cody Garbrandt fighting Takeya Mitsugaki in the Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz undercard. And I remember texting one of my friends, who, by the way, was one of the accountants of this show right here. I was saying to him, I was like, watch this. Cody's going to get a first-round knockout shot. It's like, how do you know? It's like, I just have this feeling. And then on top of that, Takeya Mitsugaki got knocked out by Cruz not too long before that fight. It was one of his comeback fights in terms of, well, this guy's going to come back after a hiatus from his injury and then having to vacate his title after holding on to that title for so long while injured. And I'm talking about Dominic Cruz. So, yeah, with Trevin Jones, it's like you don't know what type of Trevin Jones you're going to see coming into this fight, especially with Cody Garbrandt. Now, here's the thing that a lot of people have said about Cody Garbrandt. A lot of people have said that his chin is a lot weaker now because obviously there was that knockout shot from TJ Dillashaw, which was twice, and then he lost a few times, got knocked out a few times, and you got to think to yourself, is this one of those moments where Trevin Jones is going to come out here and get this knockout shot? Just like with Shogun Rua's last fight. He had a guy that was somewhat of a mid-tier type of fighter, maybe even a beginner, not a beginner, I'm sorry, like a rookie in the UFC, somebody who was in the prelims and whatnot, the Ukrainian fighter that he just last fought. So, because of that, now he has to be in this situation where he has to fight these up-and-coming guys. And Anthony Joshua, the same thing. He was used to fighting all the championship fights. He was used to taking on all these guys that were top level, or at least top level to whatever that was given to him, in the likes of Carlos Takam, in the likes of Dominic Brazil, when he was coming up as one of his first world championships that he had fought after Charles Martin. And in hindsight, obviously, you would argue that these guys are not world-class level anymore. And the same thing that you could say about Cody Garbrandt fighting TJ Dillashaw. I mean, TJ Dillashaw couldn't have looked great the way that he did, and then to have ended his career the way that it happened with the Aljo fight, you got to think that, people move on. The competition that you have faced prior to this easy matchup that you're taking on right now has moved on. They've either moved on and declined, or in Anthony Joshua's case, he fought the number 1 or number 2 heavyweight in the world. So it's not going to be that far-fetched to think that Anthony Joshua is going to starch this Franklin guy. If not, maybe fight a 12-round decision. Maybe Anthony Joshua is now in this phase of his career where he's becoming more of, how do you say this, maybe a point fighter, rather than the type of fighter that is, how do I say this, a lot more careful, a lot more attentive in terms of the way that he, tries to throw his shots. He's going to be a lot more, how do I say this, hesitant, because of the past prior experiences he had, similar to George St. Pierre, right? He got knocked out by Matt Serra, came back, rematched Matt Serra, ground and pounded him to take back his 170-pound gold at the time, and then all of a sudden now he's fighting guys very carefully. Well, here's the thing about Anthony Joshua that you guys have to understand. Anthony Joshua is now like a seasoned veteran, right? And I think an even better fighter than he ever was before. And you know what? The Anthony Joshua that fought Alexander Usyk for the second time is the best Anthony Joshua that I think you have ever seen, even though he lost. It just so happens that Usyk is one of the number 1, number 2 guys in the world. Now with Trevin Jones, he was nowhere near undefeated like it was with Franklin. Of course, you can't make the comparison with MMA and boxing and things of that nature, but the one comparison that you can make about this is the fact that boxing highly emphasizes on tune-up matches, whereas with MMA, it really doesn't emphasize any of that, because you look on paper and you think to yourself, well, Trevin Jones has never been world champion. Unlike Cody Garbrandt, he's never been undefeated the way Cody Garbrandt has, becoming an undefeated world champion. He was never in that same trajectory. But at the same time, MMA is the true theater of the unknown, and you never know what you're going to get out of these fights.